And we can order churches to do things, right? We have that authority. Of course, the church have to do this, or you have to do that. And we can discipline churches or pastors or other elders. We can discipline for failing
to act the way that they should, either morally or, doctrinally, or even just constitutionally. If a church is acting against our Constitution, we could discipline them for it. So General Assembly has real authority to make real determinations that affect the whole church. Authoritative, binding determinations. And this is our best effort to apply Acts 15 to the life of the church. I'm going to read a few verses from Acts 15. This is a very important passage for church life and church polity, which is basically church government. In Acts 15, it says, "Some men came down from Judea and were teaching the brothers that unless you are circumcised according to the custom of Moses, you cannot be saved. And after Paul and Barnabas had no small dissension and debate with them, Paul and Barnabas and some of the others were appointed to go up to Jerusalem to the apostles and the elders about this question. So being sent on their way by the church, they passed through both Phoenicia and Samaria, describing in detail the conversion of the Gentiles, and they brought great joy to all the brothers. The apostles and the elders were gathered together to consider this matter in Jerusalem, and they considered the matter, they deliberated and debated, and then at the end of the passage it says, "So when they were sent off, they went down to Antioch, and having gathered the congregation together, they delivered the letter that the Jerusalem church had written. And when they read it, they rejoiced because of its encouragement." So that's kind of the model that we're trying to follow with our General Assembly. We have all of these elders gathered together, right? Just like in Acts 15. They had apostles too, but apostles were also elders. We see that in a few different passages. So we have all these elders gathered together to consider a matter. The matter was, should Gentiles be circumcised, or should they be free from following the law of Moses? And they deliberated, and they decided the right action, which was, they're free not to follow the law of Moses, where, Jesus abolished those ceremonial laws, and we're no longer under the Mosaic covenant. And then they decreed it. They wrote a letter that had authority, and the church received it with that authority, and they gave thanks because of this authoritative decree that they received from the Jerusalem Council. And so that's what we're trying to do in the General Assembly. We're considering matters, we're deliberating, we're deciding, and then we're decreeing, and the churches are to receive those decrees with joy and thanksgiving, just like in Acts 15. In other words, it's more than just advice, right? We give more than just advice at the General Assembly. We give real authoritative declarations. But the General Assembly only meets once a year, right? So our session meetings at this church, we meet about once a month. Sometimes we usually skip a month in the summer because everybody's traveling, but usually once a month. The Presbytery, which is the regional body, we meet 3 times a year, sometimes more if we need to have a special meeting for something. But the General Assembly only meets once a year. And so, we're kind of limited in what we can do. And that means we have committees and agencies and commissions to do the work of the General Assembly throughout the year, when we're not meeting. And you might be familiar with some of these, right? Mission to the World, MTW. They handle our foreign missions. They send out missionaries around the world. They are a committee of the General Assembly. Mission to North America, they're our domestic mission agency. MNA, Mission to North America. RUF is our campus ministry, Reformed University Fellowship. CDM, Christian Discipleship Ministries, they are kind of a publishing house. They put out discipleship materials, books and things. Covenant College and Covenant Seminary, they are an agency of the General Assembly. Ridgehaven is a summer camp put on by the General Assembly. PCA Foundation handles church giving for the General Assembly. Geneva is our benefits and retirement board. And then we have the Administrative Committee. They're kind of a centralized committee that administrates the General Assembly year-round. They host our online magazine, By Faith. They plan the General Assemblies and run the things administratively. They give advice to churches or presbyteries that need to know how, to call a pastor or something like that. They help the church run in general. They help all the other committees as well, the administrative committee. And then there's the Standing Judicial Commission, the SJC. They handle the church discipline cases that go all the way up to the General Assembly. And so we have all these committees and agencies and things that work year-round to do the work of General Assembly, and then we meet once a year to kind of make decisions that will affect the way that these committees and agencies are working all year round. So when General Assembly meets once a year, we review the reports and recommendations of those permanent committees. So, for example, I was on a committee to review the administrative committee. That's kind of confusing, right? We have committees to review our committees. But when we come together in the General Assembly, we have committees that review our permanent committees, like MTW, M&A. We review their reports, how things are going, and we review their recommendations for what they think should be put into place going forward. We also review the work of presbyteries at General Assembly. So it's called the Review of Presbytery Records, RPR. They review all of the minutes from all of our presbyteries to make sure that things are going well, right? Make sure that things are happening according to our Constitution. When a presbytery examines a man to be a pastor, they have to do it a certain way. And our General Assembly makes sure that happens. And if it doesn't happen the right way, then the presbytery will be asked to kind of give an explanation. And if they can't give an explanation, then it'll go forward potentially into discipline. And the General Assembly considers overtures. An overture is a request for the General Assembly to do something. It's almost like a bill, in government assemblies. So an overture could be a request for the General Assembly to amend the Book of Church Order. It could be a request to make a statement or a declaration or a prayer. We had a few of those this year that I'll talk about in a second. Or it could be to make a study committee. We have a few study committees going on that I'll talk about in a second. So overtures, right? It's a request usually from a presbytery sent up to the General Assembly to do something in that way. And so that's what the General Assembly is and kind of what it usually does. But what happened this year at GA? So I'll talk about the experience, try to give you kind of a sense of what it's like to be there and the important things that happened. It's basically 4 days long. We meet from Monday to Thursday. So there's a lot to cover. I can't tell you everything that happened, but I'll tell you the most important things. The committees meet Monday and the first half of Tuesday, and then the assembly starts Tuesday evening and then continues on to Thursday. Again, I was on the committee that reviewed the administrative committee, which, as it sounds, was not very exciting. We met for over 4 hours. We reviewed budgets. We reviewed minutes. We reviewed recommendations and financial things. One slightly big thing was that the price of attending General Assembly increased pretty substantially because, inflation is pretty significant. So I told you there are 2,300 elders that went to General Assembly this year. That's a pretty big meeting. There are even more visitors and exhibitors and all of these things. So it ends up probably being about 5,000 people. That's a big meeting. It requires a lot of space, a lot of technology, a lot of various aspects. So it's pretty expensive to host General Assembly, and we needed to increase the price in order to reflect that increased cost that has been happening year after year. But I guess the bigger thing that happened in terms of the administrative committee was that we elected our new stated clerk of the General Assembly. The stated clerk is kind of the one that leads the administration of the denomination. Right? They're a clerk, almost like a secretary. They help things run administratively. The previous stated clerk was Brian Chappell, and we've elected Fred Greco as the new stated clerk. And I think that'll be really good. I'm excited about that. He's a very passionate Presbyterian He's very knowledgeable, and I think he'll do a good job, but he's just starting, I think, in around now, so he hasn't quite started yet. Ron Warren was on the committee to review the overtures. He was on the overtures committee this year. And so they take in all of the overtures that were submitted to General Assembly, they look at them, consider them, and then they make recommendations to the Assembly on how they should act. And that was a lot of work this year. I was on the overtures committee the past 2 years. You can't really serve for more than 2 years in a row. You kind of have to have a supermajority vote to do that. And so I moved on, but Ron was on it this year, and there were 90 overtures that were sent to the General Assembly this year. And for reference, last year there were 50. I think the year before that there were 40. So 90 is a substantial increase. There are various reasons for that. I think there's just some almost like anxiety going on in the church about how things were going, and this is how people wanted to solve it with 90 overtures. But that created a lot of work. The Overtures Committee met for about 13 and a half hours over Monday and Tuesday, hashing all these things out. Ultimately, they sent back, I think, around 20 overtures to the presbyteries. They just said, hey, we don't have time to handle this. Bring it back maybe another year. And so that's kind of what happened Monday and the first half of Tuesday. We met in these committees. I'm sure Ron Warren can tell you more about how the Overtures Committee went. It was a busy time, but they handled it really well. Also on Monday and Tuesday, like I mentioned, there are seminars that you could go to. I didn't end up going to any of them, just too busy. But some of them will talk about how to minister in this setting, or how to implement this in your church or something like that. So those can be helpful sometimes. There's also an exhibit hall. There are booksellers. There are different ministries and schools and mission agencies that you can talk to and kind of do networking there. That can be cool sometimes. And you also get to catch up with friends who are ministering around the country and around the world. So that's always a highlight of General Assembly, is getting together. It's usually Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday night, getting together with friends and catching up and all of that. The General Assembly officially begins Tuesday evening with a worship service. And the previous year's moderator is the one who preaches the worship service. And so that was, this year, Kevin DeYoung preached. He was the moderator last year, so he preached. It was such a good sermon. You guys should all look for this sermon. The General Assembly is recorded. I don't know if they separate the sermon out so you can listen to it specifically, but it was a very good sermon. I want to listen to it again. And I think it's an important thing to highlight, is that worship is a central part of what the General Assembly does. And that's potentially unique, but at least it's helpful for us to realize that the most important thing the church does is to worship, right? God created us to glorify and enjoy him forever. And that doesn't change even when it's 5,000 people gathered in one room to hash out all of these potentially controversial issues. We still start with worship and we end with worship, because that's what we exist to do, to worship God. And it kind of sets the tone, and it kind of creates a sense of unity in the room, that we are all brothers, and we're not here to fight each other over things that we disagree about. We're here to serve the Lord and glorify him. And so we start with worship, which is, I think, a great thing. We also worship every night. We worship Tuesday night, Wednesday night, and Thursday night. There's prayer services kind of in between those things as well. So on Tuesday, we started with worship, and then we met until about 10, maybe 10:30 p.m. We covered some business. We elected Fred Greco as the stated clerk, and we elected the moderator. We have a different moderator every year, and the moderator alternates between a teaching elder and a ruling elder. A teaching elder is a pastor, so a teaching elder and a ruling elder, and I think that's great that we alternate between those. It kind of shares the responsibility. It ensures that we're not getting just one viewpoint. We're only getting pastors' viewpoints. No, we alternate between pastors and ruling elders to show kind of the equality between those offices. And so this year, the moderator was a ruling elder, Mel Duncan. You might know his brother, Ligon Duncan. He's the president of Reformed Theological Seminary, RTS. So Mel Duncan, I served with him on Overtures last year. He's great, and he did a great job moderating. with the amount of work that we had to do, I was getting ready to stay until Friday, which is a very unusual thing to do, to work until Friday at General Assembly, but he got us done before dinner on Thursday. So that was quite impressive. He handled it very well. We also voted on amendments to our Book of Church Order on Tuesday night, and that's the final vote. It takes 3 votes to amend the Book of Church Order, and so we did the final vote on last year's amendments on Tuesday night. They all passed except for one, and I don't know if it's that interesting. It had to do with a minority report from the SJC. It didn't pass because somebody made a speech that convinced a lot of people that it shouldn't pass. So, but all the other ones passed, which I think were all good changes to the BCO, clarifying things. So that was Tuesday, and then Wednesday we voted on recommendations from the RPR, the Review of Presbytery Records, and that can be kind of controversial sometimes. Like, we get, all of the presbyteries are, represented in the room, and so you get, this issue from this presbytery is brought up in, this report, and that the person from that presbytery might come and kind of debate the issue, and it can be controversial sometimes. But it wasn't too bad this year. I think we handled it. There was something from our presbytery that got handled, which is kind of uncomfortable to be like, oh, that was us, but it's okay. And then we heard reports and recommendations from the other committees like MNA, PCA Foundation, these things. We heard a greeting from a sister denomination. This year it was the OPC. That's super encouraging, just to remind ourselves that we are not the only true church on earth. There are other churches that are working faithfully, and Christ is working in them, and we need to remind ourselves of that. And so we had a greeting and a report from a sister denomination. Usually we have a few more of those reports, but I think this year, just because we had so much work to do, we had to kind of cut that short, which disappoints me. I would rather hear from more churches around the world. But always good to hear those things. And if you remember from last year, we started 2 study committees. One was to revise our directory of worship and to kind of make it fully binding. And the other one was to study Christian nationalism. And so both of those committees this year gave partial reports. They didn't quite finish their work. They're basically finished, but they weren't quite ready to present it. And so they gave partial reports. The worship committee gave a proposed directory of worship. It's available. You can read it. I think it's really good, but some people felt like it was just kind of too soon to vote on it. People needed more time to think about it. So we'll vote on that next year, Lord willing. And then the Christian Nationalism Committee gave a partial report with a pastoral letter to address some of these issues. And I think it's really good. It's really helpful to the church. The pastoral letter is kind of calling out some of the worst things that have gone under the name of Christian nationalism, especially online, things that would be easily labeled as racist and Nazi ideas, and something like this happened at a conference kind of just next door to us in Ogden, Utah. There was a conference, a Christian nationalist conference, where one of the vendors was selling Nazi materials, like books written by Adolf Hitler. That's unacceptable, and we need to call out those sins, and that's what the pastoral letter did. And it also helped to clarify, there are certain forms of Christian nationalism that would fit within Presbyterianism and they're acceptable, but then there are some that go beyond the pale, and we need to call those out. I think the most helpful thing was that they looked at our version of our confession because it's revised, and they said the revised version is different than the original version. And you'd think that that's intuitive, but some people recently in the Christian nationalist camp have said, no, they're not different. And so the committee said, they actually are different. There's a real change that happened, and that's kind of an important thing. So that was helpful. So we had those 2 committees that gave their reports on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, the administrative committee gave their report. We have voted to increase General Assembly fees, like I said. We voted on a few other things administratively. We heard the nominating committee report, so we vote to place men in the various permanent committees to serve year-round. So we vote who's going to serve on the MTW committee, who's going to serve on the RUF committee, who's going to serve on the board of Covenant College or Covenant Seminary. We vote on those men every year at General Assembly, and that's from the nominating committee. It can be, honestly, a little difficult to do that because I don't know almost any of these men. And so I have to read their names, read a short paragraph bio, and then vote which one I think would serve better. And it's really difficult to do, but we did that. I think it went well this year. A lot of good men are put into their positions. And then Thursday, most of what we did was the overtures committee. And again, we had a lot of overtures. We had 90 overtures. I can't cover all of them by any means. I can cover a couple that I think were important that we covered on Thursday at General Assembly. I think it seemed to me like most of them, maybe not a majority, but a lot of them were either sent back to their presbyteries and told, we can't handle this right now, we don't have enough time, or, we don't think it's ready. Come back and fix it, and then maybe we'll consider it again. Or they were answered no. A lot of them were answered no, which potentially is a good thing. If we're always changing everything, that can be a difficult thing. So if we're, if we have 90 recommendations to change things, we should probably say no to at least some of them because they're going to contradict each other probably. I think the most controversial overture came from our presbytery, which is also a little uncomfortable, but it was to open the office of deacon to women so that women could be ordained to the office of deacon. And the answer to that was an overwhelming no at the assembly, which to me is really encouraging, right? We're an egalitarian denomination. We say really clearly that the offices of elder and deacon are open only to women, according to Scripture. We believe that Jesus appoints men to represent him in official church office as elders and deacons. It doesn't mean that women can't or shouldn't serve in other ways. They absolutely should. Like, we want women like Phoebe serving in our churches. However, they're not ordained as elders or deacons. That's what we believe. And so we held on to that belief by rejecting that overture. Some overtures came from the opposite direction, trying to enforce egalitarianism even more strictly. And we voted those no as well, and I think that was right. They were a little too reactionary, even inflammatory at times, and unnecessary because we're already egalitarians, so we don't need to, buckle down even more on that, I don't think. On a lighter note, we voted to serve wine during communion at General Assembly. In the past, it's only been grape juice, but we voted to serve wine also, which I think is an encouraging thing. We're Presbyterians. We believe that Jesus drank wine, and we should too, so we voted to do that. We voted to make prayers or to call for days of prayer. We prayed for Thanksgiving for conversions that we've seen in previous years. We get statistics from all the churches, how many adult baptisms they've had and things like that, and so we gave thanks to the Lord for those conversions and baptisms. We gave thanks for the United States on our 250th anniversary, that the Lord gave us this nation and has preserved it for this long. And we prayed for revival and renewal in the church, and we called for a day of prayer and fasting for revival and renewal in the church. We had a handful of clarifying BCO amendments that passed. I forget how many exactly, maybe around 5 to 10 or so. Clarifying BCO amendments, I don't think any of them were that big of a deal. They need to pass 2 more votes to actually go into effect. And remember, there are 2 current study committees. There's the one on worship, the one on Christian nationalism. We added a 3rd study committee on artificial intelligence, AI. So we currently are setting up a study committee on AI, and I think that's really helpful. When I first saw that recommendation, I thought it was silly and unnecessary, but then I read it more and thought about it, and I was like, no, AI is really pervasive and far-reaching, and there's a lot of potential implications for ministry. Even training up pastors, like we're going to have to deal with that in seminaries, seminary students sending in AI papers, and it's like, nope, you're going to be a terrible pastor if you can't write a paper and do your own research. Or when we're examining pastors, to go into ministry, we'll have to somehow figure out if we can check for, cheating with AI or something like this, right? So there's a lot of potential implications with that, and so we're going to have a committee that will study maybe the potential ways that AI could be helpful in the church, and the ways that it could be harmful, the ways that we can work out some of these things, potential church discipline cases and things like that. So that's a really big overview of what we did at General Assembly. Some closing thoughts. This year felt a little bit different than previous years, and I think it's because there was so much work to do, right? There were 90 overtures. We had a new stated clerk. M&A has kind of been in transition with a new coordinator there, and a lot of change to get things kind of more on the up and up. 2 study committees. There's just so much that we had to do. Reports seemed a little bit shorter. Debate didn't go quite as long as it has in previous years. In a sense, I didn't feel like we got to debate as substantially as we usually do, and kind of hash things out as thoroughly as we usually do. And hopefully people will kind of see this and be more judicious next year about what they send up to GA. I think we kind of found out the limit of the number of overtures that we can handle this year, and it's about 60, because we didn't even handle like 20 to 30 of them. And so I hope people recognize that and act accordingly, right? Let's send fewer overtures in the future. On the other hand, it was really encouraging to see how efficiently and peacefully we were able to work through such a heavy workload. There wasn't much contention by any means. There were a couple of close votes, but nothing too crazy. There was one vote. It was actually on raising the fees for General Assembly. We initially voted it down, then somebody recommended we reconsider it. We reconsidered it and we voted it up, right? So like we were really receptive to new information, and a speech in favor might sway the entire assembly. So I think we were really perceptive, we were really careful, and we handled a lot of work really well. There's a lot of transition right now with the stated clerk, with M&A, with some things changing, like we're going to pay a lot more next year for General Assembly, and things like this. But it's transition, I think, to a healthier and more transparent form of leadership. And so I think we're heading in a good direction. I'm really encouraged by the things that went that happened this year at General Assembly. There's a lot to take in. I probably didn't communicate it very well. But if there's any questions that you have about General Assembly, just like conceptually, or if there's any questions about what happened this year, I'm happy to take questions. Yes, Leona. There's a mic coming for you.
With that many people, can you hear me?
Yeah, just hold it close to your mouth.
With that many people, is there an age divide, like young people like yourself, I think of you as young, versus an older group who's...
Yeah, I think there's a good spectrum. I'm not sure if they keep track of that information when you're registering for General Assembly. If they keep track of ages. To me, looking around the room, it seemed like there was a good divide. A good amount of young men, a good amount of older men. Yeah. I'm sure it does. I'm sure it's a positive thing to have such a wide representation, different viewpoints. To me, the bigger distinction than age is region. A lot of our churches in the PCA are in the southeast, and so there's like a really good contingency of Southern Presbyterians who have kind of just a different cultural way of doing things and way of speaking and kind of different outlook on things. So I think that's the bigger difference that we have usually. Any other questions? Ron may have a question.
Hey, Christian. Can you talk a little bit about the Danvers statement that was adopted and the difference between complementarianism and egalitarianism?
Yeah. So one of the overtures was to declare the Danvers statement to be biblically faithful. Something like that was the wording. The Danvers Statement was created by, what are they called? The Institute on Biblical Manhood and Womanhood. And so it's a statement on complementarianism, saying that this is the biblical model, that men and women are created equal in God's image, but complementary, right? We have different roles, different gifts in the church and in the home, those things. So yeah, the assembly voted. It was actually a pretty close vote. It was like 900 and something to 800 and something. But we voted to adopt that statement. The hesitation, and this is my hesitation as well, is like, we didn't write this. And I'm just hesitant to adopt something that we didn't write. We don't have control over it. We can't really take responsibility for it. We have confessions. We have a BCO. That should be enough. But we adopted it, and it's a good statement. So it's a good thing. It's just, yeah, that's probably what I have to say about it. Any questions? Any other questions? Yes, over here we have a mic coming for you. Remind me of your name as well, because I met you just before we started. But.
Hello, my name is Roger. I'm from Chile, from the Chilean PCA there in Chile. So it's related to the mission to the world. That was the mission going there. Mm-hmm. Each church of the denomination is represented in that in the assembly, or the presbytery sends a few?
That's a good question, yes. Yes, every church can send representatives to the General Assembly. Every church can send at least 2 ruling elders, and every teaching elder can go.
And they can vote?
And yeah, they can all vote, yes.
Okay.
Yes. So hypothetically, right, we have just under 2,000 churches. We have about 5,000 pastors in the PCA. So we could have potentially, what would that be, like at least 9,000 attending General Assembly? That's a possibility. We don't have that for various reasons, travel and things, but yeah. Yeah, it's not, some denominations have a delegated assembly where the presbytery will choose delegates to go up. But we don't. We have a direct, all of the teaching elders and at least 2 ruling elders from every church can go. Do you have a question as well?
Yeah, just was there any issues that you were totally against or you thought were unbiblical?
The women deacons issue, and we voted that down. Even one of our committees gave advice on it, and they said this is what did they say? This is in conflict with Scripture, basically. So, yes, yeah.
Hey, follow up on that subject.
Yes.
Because it came from our presbytery.
Yeah.
The way that an overture makes its way up to General Assembly, is that any local session is allowed to raise it, or does the presbytery itself have to vote on it? Mm-hmm. And with that, were we the odd man out in our presbytery? Were we kind of the majority vote? I'm just curious.
Yeah, good question. So an overture, starts its life usually with an individual. They have an idea and they want to write it out. They can take it to their session. If it's a teaching elder, I think the teaching elder can just take it straight to the presbytery. If it's a ruling elder, they'll take it to the session, and then the session can take it to the presbytery. But if the presbytery votes no, then the session or the teaching elder can still send it up to General Assembly. So we could hypothetically have as many overtures as we have teaching elders in the denomination. And so as for this overture on opening up the ordination of deacons to women, one of our teaching elders wrote the overture with somebody else kind of collaborating, and they sent it to the presbytery. The presbytery approved it, and the vote was something like 20 to 15, I think. Yeah, so we weren't the only ones, but there was a pretty good minority. Yes. Is Mike coming?
Will churches who didn't support that overture be leaving the denomination, do you think? I know that some people probably will say, we've got women deacons and we're keeping them, so there you go. I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, I'm not sure what they will do. It seems to be a very clear answer that the PCA does not want to open up ordination. in an egalitarian direction. So hopefully they see that, and yeah, maybe they will leave. I don't know. To me, there's room for having an unordained role of deaconess. Women who serve the deacons, they serve the poor and the sick and the needy, but they don't have ecclesiastical authority the way that an office holder does. And that's basically what we already have, because we can have female diaconal assistants, and that's what a deaconess would be. It would be a diaconal assistant. So we have the substance of that already, we just don't have the title. So I wonder if maybe some of these men who are really in favor of having women as deacons, if they will push for something like that, having unordained deaconesses. I don't know. I don't know if that would be enough for them, or if they would want to just move on. I don't know. There are other denominations, other faithful, confessionally reformed and Presbyterian denominations that have women as deacons, so they could potentially go there. I don't know. Yes, Terry.
Just in response to that, locally, Spring Meadows intentionally, when we designed women's ministry, we have the Mercy Chairman intentionally to be able to do that role.
Yes.
And many churches that I served with in leadership in the PCA have handled and fully endorse that process. So
Yeah.
there's a formal way to do it without even calling them deaconesses in many ways.
Right. Yeah, essentially, our Mercy chair at the women's ministry is essentially a diaconal assistant, right? She's helping the deacons and serving, doing so much wonderful work. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah. And so, yeah, exactly. Very good. Any other questions? All right. Well, I hope that was helpful and encouraging. And if you have any questions about Presbytery or the denomination ever, I'm happy to take them. And we'll go on to our regular scheduling next week.